Welcome, everybody. Today's topic is about quality management, risk-based monitoring, but really talking about a lot of the changes that have come up in ICH and how the regulatory authorities are really looking at those. So I really want to encourage you to ask questions, share, jump in, anything you want to make sure we focus on, let me know as we go through the materials. You're welcome to come off mute and holler. You can raise your hand. You can chat it in. Whatever works best for you. So I'll definitely have pause breaks where I'll ask if there's any questions, but you don't need to hold your questions. So please feel free to just chat them in at any point. So I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I did start out as a research coordinator. I worked as a CRA, a project manager, a lead, a program developer or program leader in early phase development, and also been a director of critical operations. The past several years, I've been working as a QA auditor and also having the pleasure of coming in and doing some training. So I'll try to provide things from a very practical perspective based on lessons I've learned, things I've seen, what I've been shared or what's been shared with me from regulatory authorities. So we'll take this from a very, very practical perspective. So we'll talk about what our learning objectives are. We'll go through our orientation materials. You do have a number of handouts that have been provided to you as well. So many of those are just for reference. We won't be going through them in great detail, but I always want people to have the material to read if there's something they're not familiar with or if you want to reference it later. We will then jump into quality risk-based approaches. We'll talk about the changes in R3 and a little bit broadly how those are being applied in the industry, and then very, very specifically, what does this mean for our requirements or expectations to demonstrate we are doing risk management? We'll give some examples of the end-to-end process, some tips for successful implementation, and then we should have time for a few questions at the end as well. So our objectives: describe requirements for sponsors' quality management, identify approaches and how we actually want to do this, so how we actually do want to achieve that compliance, and talk about some next steps for implementing. Things have changed. It's been a process. In 2013, we had our first risk-based monitoring paper or position that was put out by the FDA. And we really thought about how do we do this? There was a lot of furor or a lot of discussion around what does this really mean? What does it mean to do reduced monitoring? Is it cost savings? Is it something we can only do on certain studies? Is it only for phase 3? Is it only for huge studies or huge programs? Is it only for local? And we really spun our wheels from 2013 to 2016. In 2016, we saw changes in ICH, where we actually saw the language on a global level in terms of what does risk management actually mean. So we still worked on implementing it starting in 2016. Then we got to 2020 when COVID hit, and we realized, in general, we really didn't have these programs in place for how do we remotely manage risk. We were still very, very reliant on being on site, having that in-person contact, that in-person review of data. So from 2016 to now, the regulations have changed. So ICH GCP Revision 3 was drafted in 2019, so right before COVID. And then it was finalized in 2025, so just January of this year. So that was, a pretty good time span, 6 years of, or really looking at what do we need to do. We have a lot of lessons learned. And the reason that we decided to have this guidance changed, or why the regulatory authorities have implemented these changes, is there really wasn't a good standard of transparency. We still weren't clear on how we were actually implementing quality. We're all saying we're doing it. We all have quality assurance departments. We all have auditing. But how are we actually doing it proactively? And this huge emphasis on how we do things by design rather than retroactively. So a lot of the changes that have come about, some of the ones I'm going to touch on, aren't just specifically about how do we structure this on a current study that's going on, or how do we develop that monitoring plan, but really thinking about when we design the protocol, did we build quality into it very, very specific to our population, to our study? So one of the things with E6 is it can't be looked at in silo. The concept is it should be looked at in conjunction with this document here. This is E8. So E6 is good clinical practices, and E8 is general considerations for clinical studies. And this document really does actually give us the practical aspects of how we do it. So when we talk about quality risk management, E6 talks about at a very high level that we must do it, and I'll give you the factors there in a few minutes. But E8 actually gives us a little bit more of that practical, let's break it down approach. So what are the key elements we need to consider? The unfortunate part is that you can see there's only about 3 or 4 pages worth of information, and we have to base our studies on this. But it really is one of the first times in the industry that we now have this level of detail in terms of not just concept, not just you must do this, but here's some of the considerations on how to do this. So E6 and E8 go very, very closely in hand. They should not be used in silo. So when you implement quality risk management, and we're looking at E6, we're complying with GCP, make sure your teams are also familiar with E8, general considerations in clinical trials. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So how did we get here again? Well, lack of transparency, but also the concept of we need this quality to be across the organization and not just in clinical operations. So the challenge was that we were really focusing on the monitoring processes and not really thinking about, again, all of these electronic tools, this wealth of wisdom that we have available in real time the moment the study starts. And then not just having that, but communicating to our sites the very simple fact that if you don't enter data, none of our systems work. We can't see it. We don't know if we have quality. We don't know if there's risk. We don't know if we have outliers. We don't know if we have trends. So while we're busy implementing all of these things behind the scenes and building our monitoring plans and how we're going to do it, have we actually thought about how to then communicate this to the sites? That the sites must be crystal clear that when they take on a clinical trial, they have to enter the data. We have to have that case report from information, that electronic data capture done almost in real time. Otherwise, it really invalidates the whole concept of quality risk management. We don't know what the risks are if we can't see the data. So there was really a lack of oversight. Again, with these programs, we were implementing them in theory, but not in practicality. When problems were arising, we were not doing the root cause analysis. The number one thing I've seen in CRA reports, and I actually spent almost a year just reviewing CRA reports. I was on maternity leave, I got to work from home, seemed like such a great thing a number of years ago, and so for this huge program, what they decided to do was have me be the point person for every single CRA report across all of these studies. And the number one thing that I read, the number one thing that I saw was almost anything that occurred to sites, the CRA said, retrain the site. It didn't matter what the problem was. It didn't matter if it was an inclusion-exclusion criteria. It didn't matter if there was an informed consent issue. It didn't matter if there was patients coming in out of visit window. If there was an accountability problem or an incorrect dosing or a misrandomization. The solution in every single CRA's report was retrain the site. Very rarely did it go beyond that. And the challenge with that is the problem isn't always that people don't know what they're doing. The problem is sometimes that people are busy. Sometimes equipment fails. Sometimes there is a break in communication. Sometimes there is a lack of oversight at the site itself. Sometimes there's limited access to the tools they need. Sometimes they don't have a computer station to enter the information. So just simply retraining people when those are the problems does not address the issue. So one thing I'm going to talk about as we go through these materials is very proactive, preemptive risk analysis. It's almost doing the root cause analysis on the what ifs. What if this happens? What would we do? What if this happens? What would we do? And the what if being if it's caused by a certain event. So it could be that there is an issue with the transportation of investigational product because of border control, or because our ingredients list isn't accurate, or because our manufacturing packaging isn't correct. That's going to be very, very different than a normal deviation in terms of the pharmacist wasn't available. So we have to know what is the root cause analysis, what could happen, so we proactively implement strategies for mitigating these situations. And the simple fact, pharma is wasting resources. So we spend a lot of time fixing problems that really cannot be fixed. So data that is incomplete or data that has a lot of inconsistencies, going back and remonitoring it after the fact, that doesn't give us good data. So how do we do this better up front? Our whole goal is to have more new drugs and reduce costs. That's very common sense. We all want the same thing. We just have to figure out how to do it as a team.